Okay, the fairy tale is called The Wild Swans. Let's get started. Far, far away, where the swallows fly when we have winter, there lived a king who had 11 sons and 1 daughter, Elisa. The 11 brothers, princes all, each went to school with a star at his breast and a sword at his side. They wrote with pencils of diamond upon golden slates and could say their lesson by heart just as easily as they could read it from the book. You could tell at a glance how princely they were. Their sister, Elisa, sat on a little footstool of flawless glass. She had a picture book that had cost half of a kingdom. Oh, the children had a very fine time, but it didn't last forever. Their father, who was king over the whole country, married a wicked queen, who didn't treat his poor children at all well. They found that out the very first day. There was feasting throughout the palace, and the children played at entertaining guests. But instead of letting them have all the cakes and baked apples that they used to get, their new stepmother gave them only some sand in a teacup and told them to make believe that it was a special treat. The following week, the queen sent little Elisa to live in the country with some peasants, and before long she has made the king believe so many falsehoods about the poor princess that he had no further interest in them. Fly out into the world and make your own living, the wicked queen told them. Fly away like big birds without a voice. But she didn't harm the princess as much as she meant to, for they turned into 11 magnificent white swans. With a weird cry, they flew out of the palace window across the park into the woods. It was so early in the morning that their sister, Elisa, was still asleep when they flew over the peasant hut where she was staying. They hovered over the roofs, craning and twisting their long necks and flapping their wings, but nobody saw them or heard them. They were forced to fly on, high up near the clouds and far away into the wild world. They came down in a vast, dark forest that stretched down to the shores of the sea. Poor little Elisa stayed at the peasant hut and played with a green leaf, for she had no other toy. She made a little hole in the leaf and hooked through it at the sun. Through it she seemed to see her brother's bright eyes, and whenever the warm sunlight touched her cheek, it reminded her of all their kisses. One day passed like all the others. When the wind stirred the hedge, roses outside the hut, it whispered to them, "Who could be prettier than you?" But the roses shook their heads and answered, "Elisa." And on Sunday, when the old woman sat in the doorway reading the Psalms, the wind fluttered through the pages and said to the book, "Who could be more saintly than you?" "Elisa," the book testified. What the roses said was perfectly true. Elisa was to go back home when she became 15. But as soon as the queen saw what a beautiful princess she was, the queen felt spiteful and full of hatred towards her. She wouldn't have hesitated to turn her into a wild swan like her brothers, but she didn't dare to do it just yet because the king wanted to see his daughter. In the early morning, the queen went to the bathing place, which was made of white marble, furnished with soft cushions and carpeted with the most splendid rugs. She took 3 toads, kissed them, and said to the first, "Squat on Elisa's head when she bathes, so that she will become a torpid as you are." To the second she said, "Squat on her forehead, so that she will become as ugly as you are, and her father won't recognize her." And to the third she whispered, "Lie against her heart, so that she will be cursed and tormented by evil desires." Thereupon the queen dropped the 3 toads into the clear water, which at once turned a greenish color. She called Elisa, made her undress, and told her to enter the bath. When Elisa went down into the water, one toad fastened himself to her hair, another to her forehead, and the third against her heart. But she didn't seem to be aware of them, and when she stood up, 3 red poppies floated on the water. If the toads hadn't been poisonous and hadn't been kissed by the witch, they would have been turned into red roses. But at least they had been turned into flowers by the mere touch of her head and heart. She was too innocent and good for witchcraft to have power over her. When the evil queen realized this, she rubbed Elisa with walnut stain that turned her dark brown, smeared her beautiful face with a vile ointment, and tossed her lovely hair. No one could have recognized the beautiful Elisa, and when her father saw her, he was shocked. He said that this could not be his daughter. No one knew her except the watchdog and the swallows, and they were humble creatures who could nothing to say. Poor Elisa cried and thought of her 11 brothers who were all away. Heavy-hearted, she stole away from the palace and wandered all day long over fields and marshes till she came to the vast forest. She had no idea where to turn. All she felt was her sorrow and her longing to be with her brothers. Like herself, they must have been driven out into the world, and she set her heart upon finding them. She had been into the forest only a little while, when night came on, and as she had strayed from any sign of a path, she said her prayers and lay down on the soft moss with her head pillowed against a stump. All was quiet, and the air was so mild, and the hundreds of fireflies glittered like a green fire in the glass. So when she lightly brushed against a single branch, the shining insects showered about her like falling stars. She dreamed of her brothers all night long. They were children again, playing together, writing with their diamond pencils on the golden slates, and looking at her wonderful picture book that had cost half of a kingdom. But they no longer scribbled sums and exercises as they used to do. No, they set down their bold deeds and all that they had seen or heard. Everything in the picture book came alive. The birds sang and the people strolled out of the book to talk with Elisa and her brothers. But whenever she turned a page, they immediately jumped back into place to keep the pictures in order. When she awoke, the sun was already high. She could not see it plainly, for the tall trees spread their tangled branches above her, but the rays played above like a shimmering golden gauze. There was a delightful fragrance of green foliage, and the birds came near enough to have perched on her shoulder. She heard the water splashing from many large springs, which all flowed into a pool with the most beautiful sandy bottom. Although it was hemmed in by a wall of thick bushes, there was one place where the deer had made a path wide enough for Elisa to reach the water. The pool was so clear that if the wind had not stirred the limbs and bushes, she might have supposed they were painted on the bottom of the pool. For each leaf was clearly reflected, whether the sun shone upon it or whether it grew in the shade. When Elisa saw her own face, she was horrified to find it so brown and ugly. But as soon as she wet her slender hand and rubbed her brow and her eyes, her fair skin showed again. Then she laid aside her clothes and plunged into fresh water. In all the world there was no king's daughter as lovely as Elisa. When she had dressed herself and plaited her long hair, she went to the sparkling spring and drank from the hollow of her hand. She wandered deeper into the woods without knowing whither she went. She thought of her brothers, and she thought of the good Lord, who she knew would not forsake her. He lets the wild crab apples grow to feed the hungry, and he led her footsteps to a tree with its branches bent down by the weight of their fruit. Here she had her lunch. After she had put props under the heavy limbs, she went on into the depths of the forest. It was so quiet that she heard her own footsteps and every dry leaf that rustled underfoot. Not a bird was in sight. Not a ray of the sun could get through the big heavy branches, and the tall trees grew so close together that when she looked straight ahead, it seemed as if a solid fence of lofty palings imprisoned her. She had never known such solitude. The night came on, pitch black. Not one firefly glittered among the leaves as she despondently lay down to sleep. Then it seemed to her that the branches parted overhead and the Lord looked kindly down upon her, and little angels peeped out from above his head and behind him. When she awoke the next morning, she didn't know whether she had dreamed this or whether it had really happened. A few steps further on, she met an old woman who had a basket of berries and who gave some of them to her. Elisa asked if she had seen 11 princes riding through the forest. No, the old woman said, but yesterday I saw 11 swans who wore golden crowns. They were swimming in the river not far from here. She She led Elisa a little way to the top of a hill, which sloped down to a winding river. The trees on either bank stretched their long leafy branches towards each other, and where the stream was too wide for them to grow across, they had torn their roots from the earth and leaned out over the water until their branches met. Elisa said goodbye to the old woman and followed the river down to where it flowed into the great open sea. Before the young girl lay the whole beautiful sea, but not a sail nor a single boat was in sight. How could she go on? She looked at the countless pebbles on the beach and saw how round the water had worn them. Glass, iron ores, stones, all that had been washed up, had been shaped by the water that was so much softer than even her tender hand. It rolls on tirelessly, and that is the way it makes such hard things smooth, she said. I shall be just as untiring. Thank you for your lesson, you clear rolling waves. My heart tells me that someday you will carry me to my beloved brothers. Okay guys, was just part 1 of this fairy tale, and tomorrow I will come up with part 2. Thank you very much for listening, and I wish you sweet dreams. See you tomorrow.